Scenario 15. Culture. Real Scene 4. Ecology. For modern ecologists, ecology can be studied at several levels: population, communities, ecosystem, and biosphere. Ecologypedia.com. My goal. When I complete Scenario 15, I'll know how to make tag questions and express recommendations with passive modals, ought to be, and should be. I'll also learn some interesting facts about ecology.
Introductory questions. Number 1. Do you know what global warming is? Number 2. What do you know about the ecosystem productivity? Number 3. How can you help to save the environment?
Introduction. Ecology is generally considered a branch of biology, the general science that studies living beings. Organisms can be studied at many different levels, from proteins and nucleic acids in biochemistry and molecular biology, to cells in cellular biology, to individuals in botany, zoology, and other similar disciplines, and finally at the level of populations, communities, and ecosystems, to the biosphere as a whole. These latter strata are the primary subjects of ecological inquiries. Ecology is a multidisciplinary science. Because of its focus on the higher levels of the organization of life on Earth and on the interrelations between organisms and their environment, ecology draws heavily on many other branches of science, especially geology and geography, meteorology, pedology, chemistry, and physics. Thus, ecology is said to be a holistic science, one that overarches older disciplines such as biology, which in this view become sub-disciplines contributing to ecological knowledge. Agriculture, fisheries, forestry, medicine, and urban development are among human activities that would fall within Hans Krebs' 1972 explanation of his definition of ecology, where organisms are found, how many occur there, and why. Listening. Conversation. Listen and practice.
Sam, you look exhausted.
I know. I didn't get much sleep last night.
How come?
I've been reading a lot about global warming.
Oh, I heard that the ice cap in the North Pole is melting down.
Yeah, states shouldn't be allowed to keep polluting the atmosphere.
The ecology movement is very concerned about the problem. Something has to be done immediately.
Grammar Structure 1. Recommendations with passive modals. When you think something is a good idea, people ought to be required to stop pollution. They shouldn't be allowed to use fossil fuels. When you think something is absolutely necessary, something has to be done to stop pollution. A law has to be made to prevent air pollution. Laws must be passed to control smog. Smoke from coal burning. Writing. Exercise. How do you feel about these issues? Complete the sentences affirmatively or negatively using the phrases for recommendation. A. People to smoke in public places. Allow. B. Laws to control smog in the cities. Make. C. People to recycle all disposable products. Require. D. People to throw garbage on the beach. Permit. E. Laws to ban the sale of fluorocarbons. Pass.
For modern ecologists, Ecology can be studied at several levels: population level, individuals of the same species, biocoenosis level, or community of species, ecosystem level, and biosphere level. The outer layer of the planet Earth can be divided into several spheres: the hydrosphere, or sphere of water, the lithosphere, or sphere of soils and rocks, and the atmosphere, or sphere of the air. The biosphere, or sphere of life, sometimes described as the fourth envelope, is all living matter on the planet or that portion of the planet occupied by life. The biosphere occupies the other three spheres, although there are no permanent inhabitants of the atmosphere. Relative to the volume of the Earth, the biosphere is only the very thin surface layer which extends from 11,000 meters below sea level to 15,000 meters above. It is thought that life first developed in the hydrosphere at shallow depths, in the photic zone. Multicellular organisms then appeared and colonized benthic zones. Terrestrial life developed later, after the ozone layer protecting living beings from UV rays formed. Diversification of terrestrial species is thought to be increased by the continents drifting apart, or alternately colliding. Biodiversity is expressed at the ecological level, ecosystem, population level, intraspecific diversity, species level, specific diversity, and genetic level. Recently, technology has allowed the discovery of the deep ocean vent communities. This remarkable ecological system is not dependent on sunlight, but bacteria, utilizing the chemistry of the hot volcanic vents, which are at the base of its food chain. The biosphere contains great quantities of elements such as carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. Other elements such as phosphorus, calcium, and potassium are also essential to life, yet are present in smaller amounts. At the ecosystem and biosphere levels, there is a continual recycling of all these elements, which alternate between the mineral and organic states. While there is a slight input of geothermal energy, the bulk of the functioning of the ecosystem is based on the input of solar energy. Plants and photosynthetic microorganisms convert light into chemical energy by the process of photosynthesis, which creates glucose, a simple sugar, and releases free oxygen. Glucose thus becomes the secondary energy source which drives the ecosystem. Some of this glucose is used directly by other organisms for energy. Other sugar molecules can be converted to other molecules such as amino acids. Plants use some of this sugar concentrated in nectar to entice pollinators to aid them in reproduction. Cellular respiration is the process by which organisms, like mammals, break the glucose back down into its constituents, water and carbon dioxide, thus regaining the stored energy the sun originally gave to the plants. The proportion of photosynthetic activity of plants and other photosynthesizers to the respiration of other organisms determines the specific composition of the Earth's atmosphere, particularly its oxygen level. Global air currents mix the atmosphere and maintain nearly the same balance of elements in areas of intense biological activity and areas of slight biological activity. Water is also exchanged between the hydrosphere, lithosphere, atmosphere, and biosphere in regular cycles. The oceans are large tanks which store water, ensure thermal and climatic stability, as well as the transport of chemical elements thanks to large oceanic currents. Grammar Structure 2. Tag questions. Affirmative statement plus negative tag. Global warming is dangerous, isn't it? There are lots of gases, aren't there? They should make new laws, shouldn't they? Negative statements plus affirmative tag. Coal burning isn't harmful, is it? There aren't enough filters, are there? Writing. Exercise. Add tag questions to these statements. There aren't enough parks in the city. Pollution is a major environmental threat. Animal hunting should be banned. Properly disposing garbage is important. Overfishing is depleting the oceans. Ecosystem productivity. In an ecosystem, the connections between species are generally related to food and their role in the food chain. There are three categories of organisms. Producers, plants which are capable of photosynthesis. Consumers, animals which can be primary consumers, herbivorous, or secondary or tertiary consumers, carnivorous. Decomposers, bacteria, mushrooms which degrade organic matter of all categories and restore minerals to the environment. These relations form sequences in which each individual consumes the preceding one and is consumed by the one following, in what are called food chains or food network. In a food network, there will be fewer organisms at each level as one follows the links of the network up the chain. These concepts lead to the idea of biomass, the total living matter in a given place, of primary productivity, the increase in the mass of plants during a given time, and of secondary productivity, the living matter produced by consumers and the decomposers in a given time. These two last ideas are key, since they make it possible to evaluate the load capacity, that is, the number of organisms which can be supported by a given ecosystem. In any food network, the energy contained at the producer level is not completely transferred to the consumers. Thus, from an energy point of view, it is more efficient for humans to be primary consumers, to get nourishment from grains and vegetables, than as secondary consumers, from herbivores through beef and veal, and more still than as tertiary consumers, from eating carnivores. The productivity of ecosystems is sometimes estimated by comparing three types of land-based ecosystems and the total of the aquatic ecosystems. The forests, 1/3 of the Earth's land area, contain dense biomasses and are very productive. The total production of the world's forests corresponds to half of the primary production. Savannas, meadows, and marshes, 1/3 of the Earth's land area, contain less dense biomasses but are productive. These ecosystems represent the major part of what humans depend on for food. Extreme ecosystems in the areas with more extreme climates. Deserts and semi-deserts, tundra, alpine meadows, and steppes, 1/3 of the Earth's surface, have very sparse biomasses and low productivity. Finally, the marine and freshwater ecosystems, 3/4 of the Earth's surface, contain very sparse biomasses, apart from the coastal zones. Humanity's actions over the last few centuries have seriously reduced the amount of earth covered by forests, deforestation, and have increased agroecosystems, agriculture. In recent decades, an increase in the areas occupied by extreme ecosystems has occurred, desertification. Ecological crisis. Generally, an ecological crisis is what occurs when the environment of life of a species or a population evolves in an unfavorable way to its survival. It may be that the environmental quality degrades compared to the species' needs, after a change of abiotic ecological factors. It may be that the environment becomes unfavorable for the survival of a species or a population due to an increased pressure of predation, for example, overfishing. Lastly, it may be that the situation becomes unfavorable to the quality of life of the species or the population due to rise in the number of individuals, overpopulation. Ecological crises may be more or less brutal, occurring between a few months to a few million years. They can also be of natural or anthropic origin. They may relate to one unique species or, on the contrary, to a high number of species. Lastly, an ecological crisis may be local, as an oil spill, or global, a rise in the sea level related to global warming. According to its degree of endemism, a local crisis will have more or less significant consequences, from the death of many individuals to the total extinction of a species. Whatever its origin, disappearance of one or several species often will involve a rupture in the food chain, further impacting the survival of other species. In the case of a global crisis, the consequences can be much more significant. Some extinction events showed the disappearance of more than 90% of existing species at that time. However, it should be noted that the disappearance of certain species, such as the dinosaurs, by freeing an ecological niche, allowed the development and the diversification of the mammals. An ecological crisis thus paradoxically favored biodiversity. Sometimes, an ecological crisis can be a specific and reversible phenomenon at the ecosystem scale, but more generally, the crisis impact will last. Indeed, it rather is a connected series of events that occur till a final point. From this stage, no return to the previous stable state is possible, and a new stable state will be set up gradually, homeostasis. Lastly, if an ecological crisis can cause extinction, it can also more simply reduce the quality of life of the remaining individuals. Thus, even if the diversity of the human population is sometimes considered threatened, see in particular indigenous people, few people envision human disappearance. However, epidemic diseases, famines, impact on health of reduction of air quality, food crises, reduction of living space, accumulation of toxic or non-degradable wastes, threats on keystone species, great apes, panda, whales, are also factors influencing the well-being of people. During the past decades, this increasing responsibility of humanity in some ecological crises has been clearly observed. Due to the increases in technology and a rapidly increasing population, humans have more influence on their own environment than any other ecosystem engineer.
Some usually quoted examples as ecological crises are Permian-Triassic extinction event 250 million years ago. Cretaceous-Tertiary extinction event 65 million years ago. Global warming related to the greenhouse effect. Warming could involve flooding of the Asian deltas, multiplication of extreme weather phenomena, and changes in the nature and quantity of the food resources. Ozone layer depletion issue. Deforestation and desertification with disappearance of many species. The nuclear meltdown at Chernobyl in 1986 caused the death of many people and animals from cancer, and caused mutations in a large number of animals and people. The area around the plant is now abandoned because of the large amount of radiation generated by the meltdown.
Research Spot. Look for more information about Number 1. Water pollution. Number 2. Polluting industries.